us today. Let's see what we can do about that in the small amount of time that we have. We all know that there are not that many sources, primary sources of what exactly happened in that period. A lot of the stuff that we picked up in school, started from kindergarten, you know what I mean, really has very little theological meaning or basis. Even Rambam out of character starts the halachas of Chanukka by telling a whole story of Chanukka. Doesn't say it right, it doesn't tell the story of Purim, doesn't tell the story of Sukkot, Pesach, etc. Yeah, but somehow he starts with telling the story of Chanukka. The reason being because they're really, how would the person know? There's no Torah Shebiksav, and there's so you have to, I can tell you about Purim, just read Megillas Esther. I can tell you about Pesach, read Chumash. We're coming up soon to those parshios. I can tell you about so many different things. They're all written. But what exactly is Chanukka? So the Rambam himself is what he's doing there. People don't realize it. He's quoting a book, which we today, which was well, the book is called Megillas Antiochus. It's found in the Sefer Hashmonai, Megillas Antiochus, which is something which Sadia Gaon took it seriously and used to have it read in his Kehillah every Chanukah in the morning, almost like a Megillah. But in all truth, what we really have is a Hebrew translation of an Aramaic book written by Mr. Anonymous. Some people attribute it very early to Ziknei Beishar and Beis Hillel or to Beis Hashmonai, but the truth of the matter is that the ending sentences of that Megillah says that we had fine and peace for 206 years. Well, 206 years, it means it's already post the Herodian era. Ultimately, it was written after the Churban, which means not basically Beishar and Beis Hillel, that's for sure, and definitely also not Beis Hashmonai, because we're talking about something which is post-Herod. The Malchus of the Hashmonaim lasted for 103 years, and the house of Herod and Agrippa lasted for another 103 years. There's your 206 years. So obviously this is a later day book, and therefore has very, very, very little theological meaning or value. It's a good thing for basic history, but it can't be taken terribly serious at any level of theology. The Rambam over there in the beginning of Hilchos Chanukah, where he ends v'chazar malchus Yisrael yoser mimatayim shana, that Judaism had malchus, had actually some kind of a autonomous kingdom more than 200 years. Is simply a quotation from that book. That's all it is. So to the extent that you give that book and sentences theological value, that's the amount of importance you give to that sentence in Rambam. And since that book has very little, if any, theological value, written by an anonymous author, even the language that we have it today is something which is a translation, which you don't, by an anonymous translator. I would not give too much value to that source at all. That's the one very, very famous source. Another sources are the two books of the Maccabees, Maccabee 1 and Maccabee 2. These are books that are written, who knows how, when, not sure. They're written by totally anonymous people. Maccabees 2 is written by a fellow called Jason of Cyrene, if I'm not mistaken. It's written in Greek. The Hebrew that we have today is a translation of an anonymous author called Jason, and it was written in Greek. So really, no theological value of that also. A lot of the stories that we picked up in kindergarten that we all take for granted happened are there. We don't know them from anywhere else. So that's, once again, so that's not really a source for us to understand what Chazal wanted when they decided we're going to be celebrating this occurrence for so many years, actually perpetually. So the question is, what are the sources that we can deal with? The only sources we have, the earliest sources are as follows. There are three sources which have theological value. The source number A would be the Alanissim. The Alanissim that you said today, you'll say tonight. Okay, this is how do I know that's an early source? Because the Gemara says, Lishana Acheres Kavum V'Asum Yom Tov B'Halel V'Haidah. Says that the following year, after the occurrence with the menorah, they decided that these days of Chanukka will be a Yom Tov B'Halel and Haidah B'Kvius. And Rashi writes, what does the Hadar mean? Hadar means Halal, to say Alanissim B'Shas Tefillah. Equals the authors of Alanissim. The book, the Tefillah of Alanissim, seems to have been put together already a year after the occurrence of your famous Chanukka menorah story. Actually, in the Siddur Chachmei Ashkenaz, in the name of the Rokeach, they write two versions. One that was written by Yochanan himself, Chashmonoi, and the other by Bnei Chashmonoi. But according to both versions, that's the earliest we have, that the Alanissim was written by the Hasmonean family, equals the immediate family, which fits with Rashi's understanding of the Gemara. This tefillah is something that was written and put together the year after the occurrence of the dedication of the temple.
Two drinks.
And
Of the
donuts. Now, if you look at
jelly filled donuts or chocolate filled donuts,
Daniel, please mute. Okay. Source number two, you would have probably notice the source number two. Source number three. Let's go to the latest source. Would be your famous Aneres Halalu. Your Aneres Halalu is a Masechta Seifrim, which is written at the end of the Amorahic period in Eretz Yisrael. Some attributed to the early Gaonic period, but most attributed to the later Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, that's at least a Talmudic source, a Brisa of Tanaim, something we can relate to. That's where they put it together, or later at the Amoraim. This is something which has theological value. More so, that is a tefillah which specifically is there. Its purpose is to designate and define the Neros. Here you're defining what you're doing here. To the extent you're even saying in a halacha, you're pointing out this is what we're doing for this purpose, and this is now because it says that for this purpose. We should not be using it for anything else. It's set aside for this purpose alone. So obviously we should be looking into the Aneres Halalu and see what is the reason and the purpose of the candles. Because that's exactly what you're doing when you're saying Aneres Halalu. So one should actually know what they're saying. And then you have the third source. The third source, which I would put number two in the middle between the two, and that's the Brisa of Megillat Ta'anit. And let me explain what this is. The Gemara in Shabbos, when it says my Chanukka, and it tells a story, I'm going to read it inside with you, that is actually nothing more than a quotation of an earlier source. An earlier source, which is corroborated also by a Psikta, the Psikta Basi, which is, as we all know, all researchers will tell you, the Psikta was authored in the sixth generation of Amoraim of Eretz Yisrael, roughly the times of Abai V'Rava. That would put it back in the middle, from Alanissim, which is Bnei Chashmonoi, to the last generation Amoraim, which is Masechta Seifrim. Here you have a Brisa, a Psikta, which is quoted also in Megillat Ta'anit, which is sixth generation Amoraim. Obviously, long before the redaction of the Talmud, long before Ravina Rav Ashi put together the Gemara the way you would know it. So in our Gemara, you have a quotation of a Brisa, which is called Megillas Tainus. Megillas Tainus, by definition, is a mixture of two sources we put together. The original Megillas Tainus was a list written by early Tanaim, of holidays, of days which you can't have tinus, you can't have hesped, and there are also days which you are summer tinus, etc. It's called Megillus tinus. Basically, holidays put together and were set aside during the Second Temple period. And on that, there's also what you call Gemara. Interesting, the famous Jewish, I will call him historian because that's what academia calls him. I'm not sure if he was that, whatever it be. Tzvi Gretz gave it a name. He called it the Scholia, Scolio. But that's just a name that Gretz made up. If you look at it carefully, the way the Gemara brings it, these are basically brises. These are based on Mishnah Amiroim or Tanoim. Definitely put together during the times of the Amiroim. Whether they are quotations of Tanoim or the Amiroim alone, I at the moment will not say. It is basically written in Hebrew. Interesting. The Megillus Tainus alone is written in Aramaic, and it's Gemara. So to speak, on that, the Pirush on that list is written in Hebrew. And this is what you call. This is quoted actually also in the Gemara in Shabbos. Now, I'd like to go through the source that one for a moment and to look actually at all of them, what's there and what's not there. So you know what? I'm going to start with the Alanism, if you don't mind. The Alanism that we all know, okay, so I'm not going to start reading every piece, but actually one should know that the Magen Avram holds, says Mefurish, that you say a bracha v'hidoy, you don't know what you're saying, you're not makayim the mitzvah. You know, this way you can say it, but you say whatever you want, but you have to know what you're saying. You have to thank for something. It's interesting how many people sit down and actually study in the Rishonim, the translation of the words of Alanism. It's quite perplexing. Today we have so many Rishonim on the Siddur. We have Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yoka, which is the Rebbe of the Ramban. We have Avudrahum, which is the Talmud of the Rosh. We have primary sources of Rishonim, which are not just Talmud Rishonim, which are fathers of halacha, people that which are discussed also in Beis Yosef, etc., which they interpret the Siddur. So we basically have a nusach there. Just look at it carefully, okay? I'll just roll through to a minute. Al-Anisim v'al-Apurkan on the supernatural phenomena. The Al-Apurkan, excuse me. And for the redemption from oppression, Purkan is, is pedus. You daven every Shabbos. You're praying that people should be redeemed from anything which oppresses them. You come Purkan min Shemaya. Purkan means to say pedus, pidyon. So it says Purkan ala gvuros, on the fact that God acted in gvura. Allah Chuos, on the salvations. This is not the time to explain, but there's a difference between salvation and pedus, and one has to figure out what it is. Allah Milchamot, and also on the wars. We thank God for the wars, which is really something interesting. Why would you thank God for the wars? You already discussed it, the salvation, etc. It doesn't say here the victory in the wars. The fact that there were wars. Since when we, as a nice pacifistic nation, are thanking God for wars, it's really awkward, isn't it? So obviously, I always mean to say that, thank God that we had the initiative to do these guerrilla warfare against this great empire, against all odds, and that was Siyata D'Shmaya. Thank God we didn't just, sit back and say Tillim, but we did something about it. And that's why I would say Allah Melchamas is the Baruch Hashem, that this minority of people which had no real military training, there were a bunch of farmers, that's who they were, and they got together and they decided to take their destiny in their own hands. That's a tremendous to the Shmaya. And that's the Allah Muhammad. So we thank God that we did that. I think of it today, that thank God. Sometimes it's good that God gives you the set to the Shema. Yes, you're going to go to war because you have to solve this. So it says, Kohen Gadol does not mean high priest, because we have a list of the high priest of the Second Temple period, and there is no Matityahu was not a high priest, and the Yochanan that we have there did not have a son Matityahu, It means priest of high stature. Okay, just to put this on the table. When the wicked Malchus of Yavin, obviously we're talking about, just to put this in proportion, we're talking about the house of Seleucus, which is one of the four generals which took over in place of Alexander the Great after he died, a very young man. So his empire was divided by his four generals. One of them is, all aware of the name of the house of Ptolemy, Ptolemy, which is Talmai. That's in Egypt. And Seleucus, these are the fellows that we had to deal with. They actually weren't in Athens. They were based in Syria. We're talking about the Syrian Greeks. That is the house of Seleucus. And those are the Yavanim that we're talking about here, okay? So we're talking about on the Malchus Yavan Rishon, means the Malchus of Yavan, which was based in that part of Asia Minor, which is based in Syria. And here is something we're really very, very puzzling. Historically speaking, Greece did not oppress religion in anywhere else. What did they have with us? Why was Judea oppressed because of its religion and no one else? No one else. It's interesting what the Rishonim say. I mean, they didn't want to learn Torah, and we won't learn Torah, so we'll forget it. There's one girsa found in Rabbeinu Yehuda Rabbi Yakar, not Ashkichem, levatlam b'Torah secha. Bittul Torah. They had Chanukka vacation. You know what I mean? What can I tell you? This is what it says of Ashkichem Torah secha. Ula'aviram michukar etzanecha amalet nishtakemenish. If you don't learn Hilchos Shabbos, you won't know how to keep Shabbos. It's as simple as that. And what does it say? Vatobar rachamecha Rabbi, you with your great mercy, amatalem be'sirasim, you stood on their side. You know, you had to take a side, and you took a side. What did you do? Raftas Rivam. You basically debated their debate, or represented them in their argument. One is what it's talking about. This seems to be talking. There's like, so to speak, there was some kind of din Torah, and God was our lawyer. Now, what does that mean over here? One would expect you to ask. Obviously, it means to say there was something up Shamayim, which basically there was a shikla das here or there, and God took the side, and therefore it was Rabbis Rivenu, and therefore Donas Dinenu. You see, there was Take a Shaila in Bezdin Shemala. What happened with the Jews in Judea? And God took our side. It was Rabbis Rivenu, and it was Donas Dinenu. What do you mean? He basically litigated our litigation. Well, I didn't know that we had a court over there. No one took Yovan to court. We're talking in Bezdin Shemala. The contest nikmasam, and you finally you avenge their vengeance. Masata Gibarim Biad Chalashim, which is true historically speaking. There's this great book called The Wars of the Maccabees by a General Perlman. I once read it years ago, where he analyzed the battles of the Maccabees. They really were brilliant. Quite new to the period. If you going back, if you remember for your old things in school of the American Revolution, I mean, ancient wars going till very late were always fought on an open field, an open plateau. They were dressed beautiful, with beautiful, colorful uniforms. If you remember the good old red coats. And and they stood next to each other, and obviously the first row of people, the archers, killed each other. Another row killed each other. Finally, after they killed so many people, the piece with the sword, the infantry went in and clashed. 10,000 people dying is normal at a battle. Look at Waterloo. Look at anywhere. This is the way it was. Well, these people did not engage in that. They innovated something which is rare at that period of time. They did guerrilla warfare. Many of the battles are found on uphill realities, or going downhill somewhere, not in a flat plateau, and they would flank them at the sides. They would snare into them. This was really guerrilla warfare, something that these generals were not used to. You can't do much with a whole cohort of exactly beautifully put together people when you're only in a thin uphill or downhill reality. Elephants won't help you then. At that time, your elephants are a problem. And that's exactly how they won. So this unbelievable idea of Rabin Biad Ma'at, Gibarim Biad Chalashim, which is true. They were very weak in militarily, but they had a lot of seichel. That's what happened over here. So you're saying it's alanisim that God gave us the seichel to do this crazy thing of guerrilla warfare, and we were successful. Now let's see what happens. Rabin biad ma'atim, once again, about the nature of guerrilla warfare, utmeim biad tahirim, which is against the natural order of things. This is a world which the tahirim are a minority and usually oppressed and definitely not dominant. And here, all of a sudden, the tahirim became dominant. It's not the natural order of things. And Rishon biad tzaddikim, the same thing. Zaydim means cynics. Zaydim helitzuni ad ma'oy mitiroscha loinatisi. The Zaydim, the people that, I remember what Zaydim means when I used to came back from Israel the first time. After 2.5 years in yeshiva, I meet this guy in shul. I'll never forget him. Was the president of a certain shul that I davened in. He's the type of guy that has this wet cigar in his face, and you think he sleeps with it. The type. Like a wet cigar, and he like munching it, and he says, "Hey, Mendel, what you doing?" So I said, "Well, I'm learning." Yeah. That's the fun stuff. What you really doing? I wanted to kill him. He basically tells me that I've been wasting my time doing nothing. Come on, man, make some money. So this is called Zaydim. Zaydim means those people, you flipped out in Israel. The type that are cynical, that don't give you any sense of respect for the effort you're doing. So this is Zaydim biyad Eskisur. Here we're pointing out that we look at the Greeks as Zaydim, and one has to understand why is that true. We find Zaydim is also found by Amalek. Amalek is called Zayd. It's a pasuk in Mishnah where the pasuk says, Zayd take upesi yarim. The cynic will be hit, and he will not understand what's happening. But the fool, not the Zayd, just the fool, he will become wise. So the Medrash says, Zaydim Taka is Amalek, that we hit Amalek. He was a cynic, and we won the battle. And who became wise? Not Amalek, but Yisro ben Anar. Okay, and he became Klug. Yishma Yisro, Mashmu Hashama. He heard about Amalek. So obviously, this nusach tefillah is equating somehow the idea of Amalek with the idea of Yavan. One wants to understand what that means. I'm going to roll through this. I will not teach all this tonight. Believe me, don't worry about it. I just want to point out how we have to start looking at what this is. And then it says as follows: you made yourself great PR, God. You made yourself a big name. You are great, and you are profound and transcendent in your world. And for your nation Israel, you made a great salvation. Upulkan, not just a salvation, but a redemption. Once again, the themes that we mentioned before. Also Chua and also Pulkan. But what is Ka'ayom Hazeh? That is a questionable thing, what that means. It could mean Ka'ayom Hazeh as Lahachis Amrav Ka'ayom Hazeh. It's a pasuk actually coming up in the Parshas Vayechi. That's talking about just as today. You see it today. This is what happened. Things that are clear as if they're clear today. Today is clear to me that today is this day. That was very clear at the time. It says clear as day. That's one possibility. So you made yourself a very clear understanding of your name as clear as day. Other possibility could be, there are two possibilities in the Tanakh itself. It means that it had ramifications going up to today. We still enjoy that Shem Gadol v'Kadosh B'Olamecha. That second pirush would be quite demanding, but you're saying that somehow you now still reap the fruit of that great Shem Gadol Shenaseh B'Olamecha through Chanukka today in 2000, the end of 23. Well, then please tell me how you see that. That has to be done. Well, that's another question. And afterwards, your children, no, the pasuk, your children come by pasuk Arya, a very unique pasuk where the pasuk describes the fullness of Amalek of Chanukka. It says, "Orarti banecha Tzion al banecha Yavan." The idea of Yavan and Athens and Atuna and Jerusalem, as you would say, there were the Bnei Yavan and the Bnei Tzion. Remember that. It's a very interesting title. We don't find by any other God. It's the question of the children of Tzion and the children of Yavan. This is Achikach Bo Banecha. We're talking about your children, the Bnei Tzion. One would like to understand what that means. The Dvir Veisecha, they came to your house, your Migdash. Pinos Heichal, they had to clean out your Heichal, your sanctuary. Tiras Migdashecha, they purified your Migdash. Vidliko Neres B'Chatzos Kodshecha, and they lit candles in your Chatzos HaKodesh. What does Chatzos Kodshecha mean? So both the major Rishonim, Rabbi Yehuda Reb Yakar, which is the Rebbe of the Ramban, and also Reb David Avudraham, Talmud of the Rosh, they send me to the famous pasuk in Yeshayahu Samach Beis, and there it's talking about that the pasuk there says that until now conquerors took your wheat and took your drink, your wine, and they drank it and ate it wherever they wanted. But I'm going to help you now, and you're going to come back to live in Jerusalem, and then you're going to have your Meiser Sheni, and you're all going to come to Yerushalayim to eat and drink your Meiser Sheni. And that says, where will you drink? B'chatzos Kodshecha. Look at the Radak, and called the Rishon. It means Yerushalayim. B'chatzos is based on Hashem b'zirchechi Yerushalayim. Chatzrot means what? It means the city and the houses of Jerusalem. It does not mean the Mikdash. Meiser Sheni is not eaten in the Mikdash. It's eaten in the Medina, in Yerushalayim ben Achomot. So Idliko Neres B'chatzos Kodshecha. What does that mean? It definitely doesn't mean the neres of the menorah, because the menorah is not lit. Not in the Azara, not in the Ezra's Nashim, not in the Ezra's Gvarim. Where is it lit? The menorah is lit in the Heichel. So Idliko Neres B'chatzos Kodshecha has nothing to do with the menorah. Who, since when do you light something in the chutzner? There's no such thing called a chutzner. Chutzner is based on Hashem, means Yerushalayim. Look at the Radak. I repeat let me see exactly where it is here. I have it over here. Right, Yeshayahu Samach Beis Pasuk Tes. Chatzos Kodshecha means Yerushalayim. Chatzot Yerushalayim. When they wrote, they lit candles in Chatzos Yerushalayim. So this is not referring to anything to do with the menorah or the Mikdash, because believe me, Hadlaka is only the nares have to be in the Heichal. They're not even in the Azara or in the Ezra's Nashim or the Ezra's Yisrael. They're not in any chutzner form. They have to be in a closed building called the Heichal. So what does it mean? What it simply means, just want to understand, it means just like the Gemara says in Perek HaChala in Sukkah, that they had festivities in Simcha Beis Shoeva, which was so unbelievable. How did they express that festivities? By having enormous beacons of light on the Harabayis, which would enlighten, put light all over the city. The Gemara says that the woman could check their rice in their local chutzner in Yerushalayim from the light coming from Harabayis. That's a famous Gemara in Perek HaChala. It means they had some great festivities in all the courtyards, all the neighborhoods of Jerusalem. That's all it means. Now this is written a year after the occurrence. What's starkly missing here? What's missing here is the story of the Chanukka menorah. And even the idea that we have to light candles, not true, not there. This idea of festivities. Look very carefully. What, they didn't light candles anywhere else? It became the Ikar didn't takon Chazal was only in Yerushalayim. So obviously, this tefillah, which Ibnei Chashmonaim put together, never mentioned the story that we all picked up about the good old, Pach, Katan, Hayasham, and all the other stuff over there. It's not even mentioned. Definitely not a major focus of the holiday. With the focus of the holiday is the fact that we have, Baruch Hashem, a P'dus and a Yeshua from the Yavanim. With no mention at all of this story. One wants to try to understand, well, then where is it? And this is a primary, so the earliest source we have. Then we'll go to the last source, which is Aneres Halalu, which I just said not that long ago, and you probably will be saying it soon. It says the Masechta Seifrim. Well, what's it written over there in Masechta Seifrim? You have it actually in the sheets if you took down those sources. So you have the Masechta Seifrim, where it says over there, let me just find it for a moment. You're right. Just for a minute. Right, Masechta Sefer. What do we say? We say Haneres Elu or Halalu Anu Madlikim Ala Yeshuot Ala Nisim Vala Niflaot. Very nice. As we mentioned, that's the same language found in the original Nisim. I made just taken from there. And nothing's mentioned about the candles. A very poetic way of describing the priests. He's simply pointing out that these nisim occurred through the holy priests. Now, why do we decide to call them holy at this stage? Very nice. Like the Heilige Rebbe Lamailov. That's what we're trying to say. The Holy Rebbe. Why are we all of a sudden using the lashon of Kohenach HaKedoshim? Kol Shemay Neshimei Chanukka Neres LeKodeshim and Reshut Nishtamish Bem El Ois Mevat. To do what? Why are we lighting the candles? Today, Lahodas L'Shimcha Al Niflei Secha, on your spectacular things that you have done. Al Nisecha, and the miracles. Val Yeshua Secha equals. We went back and said the things that we mentioned in the beginning. No, you're supposed to be lighting the candles to commemorate the story of the oil, etc. And this is something which the sixth generation, the Amiroim, didn't think is what we have to think about when we're lighting the candles. The idea of thinking about that miracle that everyone makes a big hoo-ha about, as we grew up in kindergarten going on, it seems to be that Chazal didn't think that is important enough to think about it when we light the candles. But that's that's in your face. That's something which is really problematic. If it's true what we grew up with, then this doesn't work too well. So it doesn't work too well. It definitely doesn't work with the El Anisim, not mentioned at all. This is even worse. You're supposed to be designating, defining why you're lighting the candles, and you don't mention the story. So then we finally go to the next source, which is the middle source. And you have it in the sheets that if you download it or print it. First, I want to read the source that we know exactly when to date it. That's the Psikta Rabasi. You have two quotations of Psikta Rabasi. This is Rav Huna's sixth generation Amor of Eretz Yisrael. So let's look at the first source, which is a Psikta in Parshas Nasa. Psikta in Parshas Nasa, Parsha Vav, on the pasuk Vatishlam Kol HaMalacha. In the first brisa, it's underlined. It says, "At motzeh, you find zot Chanukka sha'anu osim." This Chanukka that we do, zeicher lechanukkat Beit Chashmonoi, is commemorating the rededication of the temple, which the Hasmoneans did. Al she'asu milchama, they did make a war. V'nitzchu livnei Yavon, and they were victorious over the Bnei Yavan. Va'anu achshav madlikim, and we now light candles. V'chein b'shah shenigmar melechis hamishkan asu Chanukka. When you finish the melech in the Mishkan, we also made a Chanukka. Chanukka meaning a celebration of inaugural dedication. That's what this is. My shikasav zos Chanukkat hamizbeach va'av beis hamikdash b'shah shenichnas. Shenivna, when it was built, Shlomo Melech did also Chanukka. They also made it an inaugural dedication. Moshe Kasu, Vayichanchu es habayis, etc., etc., etc. So here the Psikta clearly writes the focus of the day is not miracle A or miracle B, but through these miracles, we're all in means towards an end for the capability of what? Of having an inaugural or rededication of the service in the temple. And that's what the word Chanukka means. I know we all think it means, based on Iran, Chanukka is an acronym for Chanukka, that they rested on the 25th day of Kislev, which is really historically an unbelievable fallacy. Let me just put this if you want to know. In Megillah's Tainus, there's mentioning of a holiday when they started the fixing of the temple. It was Gimel Kislev, which means already in Gimel Kislev, there was no more battles on the Har HaBayis. They started fixing the place up. So why are you telling me Chanukka that they rested on the 25th day? Already in the beginning of Kislev, there was no more fighting on the Har HaBayis, and they were working to clean up the place, the mess, so to speak. Outside of that, one has to be honest about this. One follows history, reads Flavius's Antiquities, realized that the war went on for another 17 years. And the war was not won through military efforts alone. What we did is become a terrible nuisance to the House of Seleucus of Greece. And therefore, Rome, actually 17 years later, saw that we were a potent force, which is going to drive the people crazy. We were like the Etzel and the Lechi. We drove the English mad. So finally, they decided to let us go. And that's what happened here. The Romans basically put their boot on the Greek neck and told them, get out of Israel, and they took over. What you're celebrating is basically moving, and you became nothing more than you invited Rome to get rid of the house of Yavam. So when people think they're celebrating, the great autonomy and a military victory, goodness sakes, it's like celebrating Bunker Hill, man. It took a long time till we finally got rid of we took over the country. That's what we did. It's like Bunker Hill. It's like the beginning, and we lost our who knows what. That's what this was. 17 years later, finally, the House of Greece left and came in the vacuum. Good old Rome. We invited Rome. This was done by Shimon, the last brother of the Hasmoneans. He brought Rome in order to get rid of Greece. So the war was actually won originally by being a terrible nuisance through guerrilla warfare, ultimately through good old diplomacy. Okay, by inviting a superpower to get rid of it. It's like inviting Putin to get rid of Hamas. Thank you. You know what I mean? Wasn't you believe? We ended up with Putin. That's what really happened. Sometimes I find it comical that people talk about, we became an autonomous nation. Are you funny? You were a vassal of Rome, my dear friend. After your 17 years, you paid your tax, and finally they came in and they told you what to do. The Herodian, 100 years of the Herodian dynasty were totally nothing more than a small little entity owned by Rome, and Agrippa and Herod were nothing more than puppets. That's the honest truth. So we talk about the battle went on. The great Hasmonean brothers were killed in battle. If you think of it, 5 brothers, 3 died in battle. 3 died in battle. 1 was murdered by traitors, and finally the last brother saw the victory 17 years later. That's a family which really suffered, if you think of it. And that happened afterwards. During the period of Chanukka, the war was not even beginning to be over. All we won, we took away Jerusalem from the Mityavlim, from the Hellenized Jews, and we controlled the Harabayas, allowing us to rededicate and start the temple service all over again. But even during those 17 years, there is the famous Chakra, Accra, fortress of the House of Seleucus on the Harabayas, which we couldn't take over, but they were there. There was constantly the Greek soldiers, we'll call them, and they would shower arrows on the people going into the temple. Let's understand what happened. We were totally a nation at war for many years later. So people come and tell me, well, we did this because, we won the war. Are you kidding? You won control of the Temple Mount and cleared away the Hellenized Jews from control of the capital city. That's it. Okay? The battles afterwards in the proximity of Jerusalem, Gezer, etc., they were, was it Yehuda was killed there, and so on and so forth. These people were killed afterwards. So let's understand what we're really talking about. We're talking about a battle which allowed us to finally conquer the Temple Mount to a certain extent, and allowing the rededication of the service of the temple during wartime. And that's actually the holiday. The holiday is the rededication of the service of the temple, which had been polluted and defiled through the Greeks. And that's the Chanukka. You're happy that we rededicated our religious service during this period. Let's go to the next psikta. The next psikta is a psikta in Chanukka. It's the next piece there, Parsha Beis. And there it says as follows. It's underlined. V'lama madliki nik neirot b'Chanukka. Why do we light candles on Chanukka? Ela b'shoshin nitzchu b'nafsho Chashmonai HaKohen HaGadol. when the sons of the Hasmonean equals the sons of Matisyahu, which was the high statured priest, the Malchei Yavam, that they basically had conquered Malchei Yavam, which means what? It means the Greek generals at the period, which allowed the rededication of the temple. Shneemar, Borarti Bonecha Tzion al Bonecha Yavan. That's the pasuk I quoted before, the pasuk in Zechariah. It says, Nichnasu lebeis hamikdash, they entered the defiled temple. Matzu sham shmona shpudim shel barzel. They found 8 pipes of iron. And they wanted to light the menorah because they wanted to rededicate the service. They had fixed the mizbeach, but they also wanted to do a chinuch, a rededication of the lighting of the menorah, which they cleaned the heichal. And they didn't have anything. It was all stolen. It was pillaged. There was nothing there. We were poor. And what were they going to do? So what they do, they found 8 pipes. It's a mistake here. It's 7 because there's only 7 pipes, 7 kanei menorah in this Hamikdash. It should say Shiva. It's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. And so it's Shiva shpudim shel bazel v'kavu otam, and they stuck them in the ground. They took 7 pipes and stuck them in the ground. The Medrash says somewhere else, also Gemara in Avodah Zarah, they covered it with lead. He says you have somewhat of a glossy feeling. It should at least look good, because iron obviously doesn't look that good. They cover with some kind of metal plating of lead. The boats, beis ayin sadik, boats is lead, and that's how they made it look a shtickle menschlich. And that's what did they do? They went and they lit that. Vidliku tocham neiros, and they lit in them neiros. What does neiros mean? Also a mistake people have. Ner does not mean a candle. This is already the Maharal and Ner mitzvah. Ner in Talmud means that little vessel which has a hole to put in oil and a smaller hole to stick in a wick. That's called Neros HaMenorah. That little vessel. In the menorah in the base of Mikdash, you had 6, so to speak, pipes made out of gold, and you had on top of them 6 vessels which they could put into those pipes. You could also take them out. They were not attached to it. There's the menorah, the kanei ha-menorah, the branches of the menorah, and the neros ha-menorah, which are a separate unit that you put on them. I think there was a little thing you could stick it in them, and that's what this was. That's called the neros. So they lit in them. What does in them mean? Because you had to stick that into the pipe so it should stay. So you put it in there. In those pipes, neros. That's why we light the candles. Does the Psikta mention a miracle of a little flask of oil, 1 day, 8 days? No. You know, we light the candles because the rededication of the temple was done under duress and in poverty. And that's why it's very important. That's why we want to light this, to remember that we rededicated our religion, between a hard place and a rock. That's what you light the candles for. Nothing to do with the famous story we picked up in kindergarten. The Lama Karim is Hallel. And why do we read Hallel? Well, we're definitely in the middle of the battle. Why would you read Hallel when you still had 17 years worth of the war and all you had was Harabayis? God is powerful and he gives us light. Now, what does that mean? Doesn't explain. Leaves it quite open. What we have here so far is something coming out very clearly. We're looking at the earlier sources. No one's lighting candles because of a story with an oil and a flask in 8 days. We are celebrating not that miracle at all. We're celebrating the Yeshua that we were capable of rededicating our temple and coming back to our service under the duress, pressure, and terrible pressure of Greece, which was trying to take us away from our service, and we won the battle as far as that's concerned, and rededicated the temple, middle of war, under terrible poverty, and we stooped, we had nothing else to do, we spent 7 pipes, anything, whatever we could, to start the temple service going. That's what you're celebrating. Now, this comes out in a very clear way. Now, if you have your Megillah Steinitz, which is the sources that we started with, it goes as follows. First, let's read the Gemara on Shabbos and then see where this comes from. The Gemara in Shabbos says, "My Chanukah." What is Chanukah? The Tana Rabbana, our rabbis taught us. This is a quotation of the Megillah's Tainus I mentioned first. First is the list, which is written in Aramaic. B'chav hey b'Kislev, the 25th day of Kislev, Yom de Chanukah Tmanya Inun. The day of Chanukah, which means dedication of the temple. They are 8 days. The low mispid behind, we do not eulogize in them. The low lisanis behind, we do not fast in them. Ad kan, that's the original Megillah's Tainus. Those are Aramaic words. Then comes the beginning, what's called the Scholia, the interpretation to the Megillah's Tainus, and that's what the Amoraic literature is. And if you look carefully, you'll see this is totally parallel to that to the Psikta. Let's read this carefully. When the Yavanim entered the Eichal, Timud kol hashmanim, they polluted all the oils of Eichal. And when the house of Hasmonean overwhelmed them, and they won them, they won the battle of the Harabai, so I want to be very specific. But they checked for the Matsuda and they found Elapach at the Chacha 1 flask of oil, which was laying there with the signature or the stamp, or the wax imprint of the Kohen Gadol. He only had enough to light for 1 day. The Shana Acheres Kavum V'Asum Yomim Taivim V'Halal V'Hidoah. And what's missing, for goodness sake? Hadlakas Haneros. And what's missing? And this is supposed to be explaining the sugya, this whole sugya of 2 Black Gemara, explaining the halacha of Hadlakas Haneros and all the halachas of Hadlakas Haneros. And Ravina Ravashi edited this until this is the background. That in that day we do the Hadlakas Haneros. So obviously we're saying something here. What is it? Why isn't there a mention of Hadlakas Haneros? Not here, not in the Alanissim, not in the Neros, not in Ner Salom, nowhere. The chance is, once again, let's go to right afterwards. You have the Megillah's Tainus. This is the final source, and then I'll explain it all, put it all together. The Megillah's Tainus writes, B'chaf Hey Bay, in the 25th day in Kislev Yom Chanukah, the 8 days of Chanukah, Tmanya Yomin, 8 days the low mispah that we do not eulogize. See, this is actually, I said before, the Gemara in Shabbos is quoting this Megillah's Tainus. They polluted all the oils when the house of Hasmonean had the upper hand. They victorious Batku, they checked for the matzah lepach echad she'emunah b'chisam shekayin gadol shel nitma v'loya b'lahadik al yom echad v'nasa b'ines v'idliku ches yamim v'shana acheres kavom ches yamim taivim. The next piece, this continues. This is the continuation of that. This till now, this piece was quoted in Bavli, but there's a continuance. And that continuance follows what's found in the Psikta. Why did they do this dedication of the temple for 8 days? What would the natural answer be? What do you mean? There was a miracle of 8 days. No, that's not the answer. That's not why we have 8 days of Chanukah. This is supposed to be a holiday, not dedicated, not remember a story about some miracle. You know, you think of it carefully speaking. You know how many miracles Judaism celebrate? But there's not one Yom Tov for miracles. Does anybody know about a Yom Tov for Kriyas Yamsuf? Does it say in the Chumash that Shvi should base it because of Kriyas Yamsuf? No. Is there a miracle for is there a Yom Tov for the manna, for the bear? Is there a Yom Tov for the miracles of Nachal Arnon? I can show you endless miracles in America. Does anybody decide to make a Yom Tov for any miracles? The answer is a flat no. Is there a Yom Tov for victories? Brother dear, we'd be busy all year with all the victories of Yoshua. I read Sefer Yoshua. We'd be like a Chassidish Shtiba, wouldn't say Tachnun any day. You know, you can make Yom Tov every day. What's Haksta? There's no Yom Tov for miracles. There's no Yom Tov for victories. Why is this a Yom Tov? So he said the Yom Tov is not because of the victory and not because of the miracles. The Yom Tov because the rededication, the inaugural dedication of the temple. That's what Chanukah means. You today in 2000, almost 24 hours, celebrating the fact that we went back to the capability of slitting throats of goats and sprinkling blood on altars by skirted priests dressed in white. Obviously, you're living wherever you are. I Baruch Hashem, we can do these animal sacrifices. It's unbelievable. Thank God. That's what you're happy about on Chanukka. I suggest you ask your children or your grandchildren to what extent do they really miss this and how important this is. And that's what it says. It's Chanukka HaMizbeach. Ozeg Mor B'Shim Mizbor Chanukkat HaMizbeach. This is what the Megillah says. Why do 8 days? If you're going to celebrate a rededication of a temple, it should be 7 days. Again, Balo Chanukka Shasa Moshe B'Midbar Lo Asel L'Shiva Yamim. Shene'emar Mepetach Oel Moed Lo Tetzu Shiva Yamim. I'm going to skip a few lines. V'chein Matzinu V'Yosefam B'Chanukka Shasa Shlomo. When Shlomo HaMelech made his Chanukka, his dedication of the temple, Lo Asel L'Shiva Yamim. Why do we do 8 days? I'm going to skip a line. Mara'u, why did they see La'asot Chanukka Zu to celebrate this rededication, this inaugural dedication of the temple? Shmona Yamim. Ella, B'mei Malchut Yavan Nichnasu Bet Chashmonai La'ichal. When they went into the temple, Ubanut HaMizbeach, they had to build the Mizbeach. They say Gemara Nabay Dezorah. You know, people don't realize the Mizbeach is a 3-story structure. It's a building. I'm not talking about the Mizbeach and the Mishkan. The Mizbeach and the Bayis is like a 3-story structure. It's very big. It's a building. And that was all Tameh. It was defiled. So Gemara Navay Dezor, Avne Mizbeach, Sheshitzum, Yevonim, they had to undo that whole structure, and they have to take it all out, bury it somewhere, and to build a whole new building. So what happens is they banu some mizbeach, and then it had to be whitewashed. The sadua besid has to be perfectly whitewashed. It has to be exactly 45-degree angles. It has to be exact corners. Particularly by clay sharis, they had to recreate fix all the clay sharis. There was nothing left. But you misasking by Shmona Yamim. It took 8 days after clearing the mess up, just to build all that. And that's the answer why we celebrate this 8 days. We celebrate this one more day. 7 days is the regular celebration of a dedication of a temple. The added day is for the effort. We had a big job to clear out the mess and rebuild. It's much harder to rebuild than to build something new. The added day of Chanukah is the added day of celebrating our effort under duress. That's what this is. 8 days of Chanukah is Chinuch HaMizbeach, 7 plus 1 day for the hard labor. Because time continues, and why do we light candles? And this is parallel to that psik that we saw. They had 7 pipes because there was no menorah. It was pipes made out of iron. It's not a pleasant. Iron is not something aesthetic. And they covered it with lead to make it a bit shiny. It's like, please, they have these things that, so to speak, that the fourth cousin 7 times removed to something glossy. That's, they have this, they say this is, so to speak, the menorah. That's why we light the candles. Because the dedication, we were poor, we did the best we could. So it's a celebration, a rededication of religion under duress, under pressure, in poverty. That's why we light the candles, to remember we did this when the chips were down. We did this when it was very hard, and we did this and it works. It's literally a celebration of effort and going forth even when things are really rough. Why the hollow? It's a serious question. For goodness sakes, the war went on for 17 years. So it wasn't the reasons given for hollow, either Shibud the Geula. Well, they were still very much in Shibud. Until 17 years later, they still were very much in Shibud. They had conquered Jerusalem, the local Jerusalem. All of Judea was still under good old Greece. And that went on for years and years and years. It wasn't Sheba the Gula. It wasn't Mavis L'chaim. Tell Judah the Maccabee. He died 3 years later. So why did they say Hallel? People told me to say Hallel for what? You meant to say Hallel because of a miracle of a story with the candle? If that's the case, we should be saying Hallel on all the miracles in the Mikra. No. Are we saying Hallel because of the war? You were in the middle of battle, man. People died. What are you doing? So what is this? Why do we say Hallel? Any salvation which God gives us. This was the custom. The custom is whenever we had any sense of salvation, even if it was not perfect, we still thank God. Well, which salvation is here? The capability of the rededication of the temple, under war, in poverty, under duress, with the Greek soldiers shooting their arrows onto us from their fortress on the Harabais. And that's also a salvation. And the custom was then to thank God for that. He brings an unbelievable pasuk, and this is the pasuk in Ezra Perek Gimel. I'll tell you what the story pasuk is about. Pasuk there is when they laid the cornerstones to the foundations of the second temple. They didn't build it yet. It took many years later until it was finally built. Nehemiah finished that job. But basically, they put the cornerstone. And the Zakanim saw, oh, this is going to be a small, poor little building compared to the glorious building that was there in the Solomon's temple. And they started crying. But yet, although with tears in their eyes, they all said Hallel, even for the laying of the cornerstone of this rededication of the temple. Now they were still good old. Their king was called King of Persia. There was no autonomy. It was still Shibud, Akat Abdi Achashverosh Anon still existed. But they said Hallel because that was the custom. Because on any salvation, even some kind of salvation, you have to thank God. What we are doing now is therefore saying what? We are saying Hallel to remember that then also they said Hallel because that happiness that finally a process has begun. Now we're far from the end of it. So the Hallel is not Mavis L'chaim, it's not Shibud L'Geula. It's a whole new din of Hallel. It's a Hallel saying thank you for the small things, even in the middle of a war. Thank you for rededicating the temple, even in war, even in poverty, even the people dying right and left. But there's something here which is unique, and I want to describe what's so unique about it. This is the story of Chanukka. The real question is, well, if that's the case, what is the story of the candle and the flask and the oil, which is mentioned in Megillus Tainus, but doesn't say that's the reason for lighting candles, doesn't say that's the reason for the holiday, yet it's there. What's it there for? That which was mistaken, everyone asked this question, a famous question of the Beis Yosef. The miracle was for 7 days. Why do we have Chanukah for 8 days? That whole thing is based on lack of having the manuscripts that we have today, which is what you just read. Beis Yosef didn't have a psikta. Beis Yosef didn't have this Megillus Tainus. So he asked this question, and there's like 150 terutzim on the question. But in all truth, the question doesn't begin. The holiday is not because of that story of the candles. The 8 days is because of the effort that we did to clear up the mess and try to do it again. The Hallel is because beginning of a process of something which we never thought would happen. The candles are because we did this under poverty. There's only one question that has to be asked, and that is, but why are we perpetually celebrating this? Does anybody remember when the Chanukka Sabayis of Ezra was? No. Does anybody remember when the Chanukka Sabayis of Shlomo was? Maybe some of you do. Right before Sukkot. Does anybody remember the exact date of the Chanukka Sabayis of the Mishkan? Well, that's possible. It's Chodesh Nisan. Does anybody celebrate that today? No. Why are we celebrating today the Chanukka Sabayis of the Chashmonaim under duress, etc.? That's the question you have to ask. That's the one thing that the Tanoim, the Amoraim here did not ask. Why are we celebrating it at all? Obviously, it's something which has to do to us today, and we celebrate today because that is by Yom Haim and Bisman Hazeh. What is that? Okay, so wow, the hour's gone, but I'm going to do this a bit of this just to get this a bit down. Well, to understand this, one has to understand, I remember in school it was terrible. Every time I wanted to play sports, the Rebbe Cheder would say, ooh, sports is Yavon. Come on, man. They didn't play hockey. Give me a break, or I like art. Oh, Yavon. What are all the good things in life are Yavon? What do you want from me? What's wrong with Yavon? I know that Judaism doesn't have too many great artists. They have paper cuts. That's all they have. But there's nothing wrong with enjoying aesthetics. There's actually a beautiful Chatam Sofer in the beginning of the third parak of Sukkah, where he says a person should be like God, and God has a tremendous sense of aesthetics. He builds a beautiful world. You're commanded, he says, to develop a sense of appreciation of aesthetics because you have to be like God. He said that's a key mitzvah of Allah b'dracham. So, this Rebbe in school, art, it's Yavon. They drive me crazy. I love, hockey. Bobby Hull was a great player. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? No, Yavon. They didn't have ice in Greece. For goodness sakes, what do they want from me? Anyway, what's the story with this Yavon business? Okay, there's so much Lashon Hara said about Yavon. And it's very, very, very not well thought, not researched, not learned. I'm going to put this down in a nutshell, nothing more than that, because the time is short, but it is very important. There are different periods in the world of Greece. There's the ancient Greece that we all know, or maybe know, or should know, from the famous Greek tragedies. Everybody somewhere in high school had to write a book report on Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, or something like that. And that's the world of Greek totally fatalism. People, you don't control anything. Everything is from the gods. You're going to end up marrying your mother and killing your father, if you're going to do a pun off of Oedipus. And it's not up to you. You can't control your life. You can't control reality. It's Hakol B'dei Shamayim, Afilu Yirat Shamayim. Everything is up to, everything's decided before. You have you're just, there's a game up there between the gods and they decide what's going to happen. You're just the pawn on the board. Which was heavily, very much celebrated in literature. And we all must have read these different tragedies. One major theme, and that is the Oracle of Delphi will tell you when you're born what's going to happen to you, and you can't walk away from it. It's your fate. That's ancient Greece. And then something happened in history. I can pinpoint it, but I think it's a bit too late, where Greece decided to free itself of the shackles of this terrible pagan, determinism, and decided to kick God out of the center of the arena, would put man in the center. I grew up with Greek and Roman and actually Norse mythology, so I'm very comfortable with this. And they, I would say, deified their gods. Their gods were no more pristine, pure, that you look to them for values. Who are the gods? I'm the Olympus. It's a bunch of a dysfunctional, violent, horny family where the great god Jupiter is basically cohabiting with his daughter Venus. You know what I mean? Everybody is doing something to somebody. The question is when and where. And they're killing each other. They're fighting with each other. It's a bunch of powerful, potent forces, but they are far from pristine pure. No one looks up to them. What you do is you appease them because they are frightening. They can throw thunderbolts at you. They'll shoot arrows at you. I don't know. It's a story of misery up there. It's a story of jealousy, fury, incest. That's the Olympus. Read it. I mean, I grew up with this. I never could understand why people actually thought this was like this. They called it religion. Yeah, religion did not become a source of meaning and values anymore. They couldn't pull away the shackles from believing some supernal great powers, but they were powers which had to be appeased because they're dangerous. And man, slowly but surely, kicked this not become the center of his morals and ethics. Where did man look for meaning and purpose? In himself. In himself. Man started deciding that the world is quite orderly and I will figure it out. And I can figure it out. And since I can figure it out, I can control it. Control it, I mean, conceptually, I can control it. It doesn't frighten me anymore. I actually now can figure out how to drop certain stones and I'm going to get in a magnetic field. Wow. And I can generate electricity. And I can decide and understand structures of geometry. And I can understand so much the world of deductive thinking that we have today. The math, which started with us, the geometry we have today, the astronomy we have today. Goodness sakes, where was geometry without Euclides? All that is Greece. Greece came to a conclusion, reacted heavily to the beginning of the period, which everything was the Oracle of Delphi and struck by thunderbolts by the great gods. If the gods are not the source of anything, they're just dangerous. We have to appease them. And man can figure it all out. And man has his destiny in his hands. Oh, yeah, we don't want them to disturb us. So we'll ask the augur, in what direction are the birds flying today? Yeah, that's just to make sure that no one bothers us. They didn't pray for Siyata Dishmaya, they prayed for non-intervention. They trusted themselves and they were right to do so. In the world of science, the way we know it today, the world that everything can be understood because the world is actually, as good old Einstein said, this is before quantum, that God doesn't play dice, right? Everything is a causative relationship between the cause and effect. It's an harmonious merging of elements. Everything can be figured out because every effect has a proportionate cause, and thus we can rule. We can rule conceptually, therefore we're not afraid of it anymore. We're not afraid of a comet because we now know what comets are. In the ancient days, a comet was an omen of the gods. Today, we know what a comet is. Believe me, it's not an omen of anything. Okay? People were afraid of so many things, until they figured things out. Today, we have drugs and medicine. We don't think that we're not afraid to take a bath. In Europe, you kidding? They took a bath once in a lifetime. Why do you think the French developed perfume? As simple as that. This is actually true, by the way. I mean, you must understand that we have to thank Greece for the idea of accepting the capability that we can understand things and there's an orderly world out there. It's because of that they celebrated harmony and aesthetics. What are aesthetics? Aesthetics are the harmonious merging of different elements. They felt that creation is aesthetic, equals this harmonious merging between causes and effects. Ultimately, therefore, that's when we have the capability of understanding the cause by analyzing the effect. If this would be a disharmonious reality and it wouldn't be a proportional relationship with the cause and effect, then nature controls you or you do not control it because you cannot figure them out. And then you're frightened and all you can do is sit in the dark and say Tillim. But today we know, thanks God, we know so much. Think of where we are in science and everything. You thank Greece for all that. But Greece took this to a very far end. And that's what the Rambam writes in Hilchas Avodas Yom Kippurim, B'mei Bayis Sheni, Tzotza Haminus. The idea of not heresy grew in Greece. Heresy. Yes, man can control reality. Man can understand what causes rain, so he doesn't have to put on his feathers on his head and do an Indian rain dance anymore. He can actually inject iodine into the clouds. Man is not afraid anymore of every small sickness. Thank God. We know what causes things slowly but surely. We've developed, haven't we? We know what antibiotics are. When I was a kid, they still had only sulfa. You know, things we've come a long way. And all that you must thank Greece. Greece was reacting to the total, almost throttling, choking hold of religion, which they took to the extreme of being totally deterministic, into no, there is no determinism. We will determine our fates. Now, this came with a big price. For them, it meant that it was a reaction to a throttling religious experience of fatalism, fatality, literally terrible, into total deifying their gods. They became not paragons of meaning and purpose. Anything they were, you look at them, you do the opposite. And the lesson of the Ramban is in Parshas Balak when he describes Aristotle. Aristotle, which Rambam celebrates as the man which came the closest a human being without prophecy and without religion can attain through his mind. He celebrates him as a superman in thought. And he was a great, great man. And he says, Oisei Rasha, Ramban quotes him and says, Aristotle, that wicked man, Shemasha Eino Mevin Eino Kayam. If you can't comprehend it, it can't be. Now, this is obviously that way, because if you want to run away from the throttling control of the gods, you must say the opposite, that there is nothing I can't understand. If there's something I can't understand, it means it doesn't exist. And we have that going on. This, if you go to any in the real world of academia, that's the way it is. If I can't comprehend something, or will somehow curtail my sense of freedom, I will immediately say it's not true. Try teaching intelligent design in Harvard today and see what happens to you. You'll be perceived as, oh, you must be from the Bible Belt. Because Eino Mavin, Eino Kayam. That's the truth. So Greece, that's what happened here. You have to understand, no other society was a nuisance to this idea. There's only one nation which embodied the idea, accepted Greece, embraced Greece, but said it's only a means towards a bigger end. And that was Judaism. On one hand, yes, the pasuk says in Noach, Yafta Elokim leyefes. Yefes has the sense of aesthetics. V'yishkon ba'al Shem, but he must reside in the world of principles of the Semites of Shem. The pasuk is saying, yes, you understand that looking into the wisdom of nature, science, math, astronomy, all the different things are tremendous things. It's a beautiful aesthetic world. And it's aesthetic because the aesthetics of the world, the proportional relationships between different angles of the world, are the tools that we use to understand it. And it's very important. We are commanded to understand the world. What does it say? The pasuk says, Urdu b'gas hayam uba'ofa shamayim. What does that mean? You must catch trout for gefilte fish? It means say you must control it through knowledge. Man is commanded to understand the world around him. You cannot be a caveman. Rambam writes that when Moshe Rabbeinu asked God, "Hareini noas drachecha," show me your way. So Rambam writes, well, that means say he wanted to understand all the different disciplines of science in order to understand the God of nature. And God infused him like the wisdom of Solomon. He got his PhD in all the different disciplines. The only thing he didn't get was the top graduating PhD in metaphysics. That he didn't get. I'll show you my way, but you'll never know me. We also believe, we honestly believe, we believe that is true. We are commanded to understand God through his actions and through science. We're a different goal than Greece. Our goal is this is a Rambam. Rambam writes in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah Perek Beis, B'shashi Yisbonen Ha'adam. When man will contemplate the unbelievable wisdom of nature and of science. You read the infinite, unending depth of God's wisdom. And how do you feel about that? You stand next to it, and you now have 6 PhDs. You feel you're a birya, ktana, shfela, v'de'a mu'ata. You feel like a small, puny, non-enlightened creature standing in front of the ultimate infinity of wisdom. Mul tmim deot. And that's the sense of Yiras Hashem. We use that. Our ultimate goal of mastering all the disciplines is to understand how little we know. No, it's so true that it's crazy. When I was a young kid, I'm sure I would know everything. And when you're a young kid, you think you don't know much, but you think you know everything. You get a little older. I can say that now with this gray stuff on my face. The more I know, the more I realize I know nothing. Garnished. That's what Judaism is all about. Greece was right. Man can and should control the world around it. And aesthetics is very important because it allows us to understand that. Why do you think they glorified the body? They saw the body as the most beautiful sense of aesthetics, how everything, different elements are proportioned and everything fits with everything else. If you look at the human body as an unbelievable chain mechanism, it's frightening to think the wisdom found in that body. And every sinew and every tendon is in the right place and it works in the right way. It's unbelievable. Go to medical school. Just look at it. Buy yourself a telescope or a microscope. Just look at it. Yeah. But that's not to run away from a God, not to try the Declaration of Independence. Therefore, I control the world and nothing outside of me exists. No, it's in order to annihilate and actually to annul your sense of gaiva. You become very humble. Believe me, I mean, the first time I saw Victoria Falls from close, I felt very humble. It makes Niagara look like a leaking faucet. It's like, these are unbelievable things. You see the wonder, the wisdom, the thought, so many disciplines jump up in your head when you see reality. You feel very humble. Literally is a language in a book called Yedaya Pnini. He's a Ben Dorei of the Meiri. He has shuvas with the Rashba where he writes, Tachlet HaYediyah, the ultimate knowledge is Shelo Neidah, that we know nothing. Ultimate knowledge says we don't understand anything. We know so much today, and there's so much more to know. This idea that nothing exists outside of, but the difference is everything possible to understand? Yes. So the world will say yes. We just need more tools. It's true. We didn't have a Hubble not that long ago. The only difference is that we know it all ends with an infinite God, which is beyond comprehension. We use all this as a ladder to meet the infinite God, which is beyond comprehension. We don't deny his existence and just live with what we understand. So Greece is right. But you know what? The worst thing about a lie is when it's only a half truth and tells itself it's a whole truth. No, tell me a lie that I know that the Holy Bear in heaven made of the world. Okay, that's a lie. But you're telling me, Mamish, 90% of the truth, but you're denying the last 10%, which really would count. You made a means into an end and denied the end. That is the sheker of Yavan. You must understand in that world at that point of time, man universally stopped believing in gods and was moving towards the world that we have today. Slowly but surely, the gods all over became less popular and less deified. They became powers that we appease. And that's what the Rambam said, B'mei bayit shenit tzatza minus. This affected the world of religion all over. Because religion was based on the idea that man doesn't understand anything. He looks to God for messages and ideas. And all of a sudden, man says, I don't need a God for that. I can figure them out myself. I don't need God for rain. I know how to do it. I understand what exactly happens when I plant things, and I can figure out how to do other nutrients which will help me. I have to pray for everything. I have to pray when I'm sick. I simply go to a doctor. Then he went to middle school. He'll tell me what pill to take. And slowly but sure, you forget that at the end of the day, it's right for Chol Basar is God. Religion goes through a major crisis. Can religion exist in a world which deifies its gods and finds meaning and purpose only in the human capability? Which is the question we should be asked today. Can religion thrive in what we would call a postmodern world where there are no more absolutes, because everything depends on a subjective understanding of man, and that changes with the weather? My truth is not your truth. There's no more absolute truths, for goodness sakes. Can religion exist? Don't you understand that that period of time when Greece came on the stage, it actually destroyed religion the way history knew it for thousands of years? And religion had to be reshuffled to accept the fact that man can understand, and yet using all that knowledge to becoming annulled in front of a supreme, non-comprehensible God. Religion had to be kicked up, redefined. See, it was easy for the primitives. Oh, we don't understand anything, so there's God for everything. But what do you do if you grew up in Cambridge or went to Oxbridge? And you know what a laboratory looks like. Can religion thrive? And the answer is yes. That's exactly what the chinuch avoda of the Mikdash is, b'mei Yavan. We still have a lot of battles to make. We do accept Yef Yefusa Shel Yefes. We only put it in its right place, Ba'ar Le'Shem. That's Chanukka. Yes, the dedication of the temple at that era is a totally different ballpark. It's nothing to do with the Mikdash of Shlomo. That's passé. The idea of creating a service where the wisdom of Judaism will not be polluted by finite man, but all the man is a thinking man can still embrace the infinite, the transcendent, that would accept the fact there is more and beyond his comprehension, making himself feel birya, shfela, chashucha, bedea, mu'ata, mul tamim deos. That Lashon Rambam, that is the recalibrating of religion. The religion that we live in today, Baruch Hashem. And sorry to say, there are people which still think that being enlightened is dangerous, so they will also go back into the cave. And there are people which are failing in their religion because they somehow embraced Greece a bit too much and forgot this is all supposed to be a means towards an end. And the solution is, yes, to teach ourselves that we are looking for a God, and these are all means for an end. It's a means of attaining intelligent anava, intelligent bittul lifnei tmim deos. That's our success. That's the success, Baruch Hashem. You know, there's a lot of Torah happening, and there's a lot of Torah within the Western world, and religion is it's continuing. It's unbelievable. We must thank the Hasmoneans that waged that war. It was the war of continuity of religion in an intelligent world of science, intelligent world of man running away, turning his back on the gods and wanting to find meaning only in himself. It's interesting to see that prophecy stopped at that period of time. There were no more messages from God. Man had to find meaning of even of God within the books himself. Ma'or Shabo Machziro Lamutav, man had to find meaning within his understanding of the text. He wasn't getting messages from God. No, Yeshayahu was not coming off the mountain saying, I spoke to God yesterday, and this is what he has to say. Oh, that stopped at that same period of time. That junction of the beginning of Bayis Sheni, all of religion was modified. And it came to a big, big period of change. The crisis was Yavan and the beginning of the successor religion, which continued. Yeah, it's B'yamim Bazman Azeh. When I see a boy really Torah Yerushalayim going out of Yeshiva University, you know what I mean? And he's a man of education. He's a man which Torah Kfa, you know what I mean? And the person which cares about development of his religion, I say, Wallach, happy Chanukka. Sometimes I think that's why we have a menorah on top of KBY based measures. You see, I think for me, the best holiday of this century is Chanukka. It means we still exist. Listen, have a meaningful Chanukka. I'm sorry I took over too much time for yours. We are half an hour more than regular. But believe me, I didn't do a third of what I promised. But I hope this will give some time a meaningful Yom Tov and teach it to your children and your children's children. They should be very happy. They look at, yeah, I'm just looking at the logo of KBY now. Look at that menorah, man. That's what we're all supposed to be about. We have to have enlightenment. But you know what? It's got to be a part of the kippah of the yeshiva. Okay? That's why we celebrate that this Yom Tov. And that's why the miracle was an oil. The Maral says this. You know why we celebrate it? Because God showed us that this unique celebration under such duress, I'm part of it. And he had this little miracle to add in this rededication of this temple to say, hey guys, you see me? I'm defying the laws of science. You guys will defy the laws of nature. And this will continue. You're a freaking occurrence. It's going to continue. So the only reason what that candle is for is to tell us, guys, celebrate this yearly. Celebrate the dedication. And God told you, you know what, guys? The celebration is forget 1 day, 8 days, 10 days, whatever you need. Science is nice and important, but I'm above it all. Have a great, 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 great meaningful Chanukah. Love you all. Bye, guys. Kol tov. Bracha v'atzlacha.
Thank you very much.
Bracha v'atzlacha. Kol tov.
חג שמח, להתראות.